Recent debates on sustainability transitions have highlighted the need for a holistic understanding of both supply and demand side phenomena that affect resource consumption in contemporary societies. That is, to zoom out and look at the big picture of what makes our societies work, and then also to zoom in and take a look at the practices on a human scale. In the following, we walk you through a conceptual framework offering a bridge between two influential theoretical approaches that share several commonalities: the multi-level perspective, also known as MLP, and social practice theory. Multi-level perspective mainly focuses on socio-technical system change with an emphasis on policy, economic and civil society actors. Social practice approach, on the other hand, has primarily been used to study consumers' everyday life. So first, we zoom out and look at the MLP model. Using MLP, we look at three levels of society. First, the level of new niches, ideas, innovations, and so on, all competing to become established in society. Then the level of regime, the already established socio-technical systems of society that we want to change if we wish to see a transition happen. And then the landscape, the global trends and influences that put pressure on existing systems to change. Our own work here builds on a recently published framework outlining 6 intervention points that could speed up and enable the processes of niches becoming new regimes. So first, it's the stimulation of new niches, such as R&D funding, for example. Then accelerating the niches, such as innovation platforms or investment in startups. Then actively destabilizing the existing regime with taxes and bans and removal of subsidies. Then addressing the spillover effects of this destabilization of the regime. For example, with combating structural unemployment. Then providing coordination to multi-regime interaction, for example, promoting of energy efficiency in buildings. And then actively tilting the landscape, negotiations for international agreements to speed up the transition, for example. In practice, interventions in these points do not have to happen in a linear order from 1 to 6. Real life is obviously messier, full of overlaps and twists. So this was our zoom out picture. Our zoom in picture, on the other hand, is based on social practices. And here we zoom in and take a look at how they work. A social practice is a routinized type of behavior which consists of several elements interconnected to one another. A practice depends on the existence and specific interconnectedness of these elements and cannot be reduced to any single element. The simple model consists of the following. First, the material environments and things connected to the skills and competences, and with the meanings. And all of these things are interconnected by various forms of interactions surrounding them. Now, practice theory looks at individuals and organizations as carriers of practices, which are reproduced by constant performances. Change of practices evolves naturally, as performers are never identically the same. However, a transformation can also occur as a result of a deliberate intervention. For example, when the creation of a bike rent system in a city encourages people to switch their mode of transport. All levels, the niche, regime and landscape, constitute specific affordances for practice change. In order to zoom into the 6 intervention points we elaborated on before, we have combined them with 3 broad types of social practices and change strategies. So first one is the creation of new practices from scratch and supporting their spread. That means nurturing of proto-practices and upscaling and mainstreaming them. Second is changing existing practices via altering the ways of their reproduction. Here we mean three things mainly: reducing resource intensity of new performances, substituting old practices and changing how practices interlock with each other. And third, divestment from entranced and resistant incumbent practices. This means making the reproduction of certain practices difficult through regulation and governance or economic constraints, such as removal of subsidies or increased taxation that make current industrial or domestic practices increasingly difficult and expensive. And now, to combine the zoom out and zoom in approaches, we look at which everyday practice change strategies are logically combined with the 6 intervention points outlined before. And we start at a level of niches. At the niche level, it is crucial to nurture sustainable proto practices through strengthening the links between their elements. For example, instead of offering one standard solution and financial support for retrofitting houses, the homeowners could be involved in designing alternatives for non-standard houses and a wide variety of technical solutions combined with teaching new skills for using these new materials and methods. In supporting the growth of niches, it is crucial to facilitate the access to new performance of the practice, be it through lowering the price or supporting regional spread. For example, retraining of oil shale power plant workers or to work in green energy sector, or development of peer-to-peer energy trading through creating new digital platforms and changing existing legal regulations. Okay, and now let's take a look at the regime and landscape levels. For destabilizing regimes, the most critical strategies are the disruption of certain practices and recrafting new practices. For example, enabling distributed local energy production by introducing more liberal regulation. For tackling of spillover effects, the facilitation of access to new substituting practices is crucial. For example, the construction of a green energy-based electric vehicle charging network. In coordinating regimes, the social practices-based approach acquires a specific importance as everyday practices span different socio-technical systems. Home cooking involves agriculture, energy, retailing and transport systems, or retrofitting houses cuts into building, spatial planning, transport, as well as financial systems. Each of them needs to be aligned. As the landscape level often consists mostly of events and phenomena beyond the control of policymakers, building the landscape has so far been conceptualized mainly in terms of policy processes of international lobbying and negotiations, which can aim at various bans and regulations. Strategy is about making choices and allocating resources. This is what our proposed new framework will enable, a step-by-step process for practitioners to follow in order to design impactful policies. Even though our presentation did not touch upon transition pathways, ideally an analysis of the phenomena in the given socio-technical regime and the types of changes most suitable should be analyzed. This is outlined more specifically in our project team's recent paper published in the Research Policy Journal. The next step is to identify which intervention points are critical at a given moment. For example, as the recent Just Transition movement and European Commission level governance exemplifies, addressing the repercussions stemming from regime destabilization could be one of the hotspots to look at. Yet, intervention points as such are rather abstract categories, and many different types of social groups with their characteristic domestic and professional practices, so to say, populate these points. Thus, analysis of practice types, their vulnerability or entrenchment, their potential blocking or catalyzing impact for sustainable transition is the next step. And also it leads to selecting a strategic approach, whether to nurture something emerging or to provide access to something existing for new social groups by removing some barriers. Only after this strategic zoom-in, a design of a particular relevant and feasible policy instrument should be in order. We thank you very much for your attention and we welcome all your questions now.